have to know, right? I need that. I need that information. And I know that if I went to sleep at night and I had this opportunity and I didn't take it, I just would have a hard time. I'd have a hard time sleeping. Then there's the version of me that is, right, why is it important for me as a trainer? And I look at this room and I see all these people who found a way in the middle of the day, in the middle of the week, to say, I'm going to show up for this. Because there's someone in my life who I love that much, who I care about that much, to be able to say, I'm going to put my other stuff off to the side. I'm going to make sure that I am present for this. And if you all are going to do that, then man, I have to be here. I have to be able to do that. I have to be able to be there to help you and support you. Because what more important thing is there than saying, all right, I want to reinforce, I want to say thank you to all of you for saying, I'm willing to take my time and take time out of my life to learn how to help somebody else. So I am so amazed and impressed that you're all so willing to jump into this, that very much motivates me to say, that's the reason why I'm here. That's what's important to me. And so that's my version of answering these 3 questions. I'm going to ask you, as we split up into small groups, to do the same, to sit with your participants, with the other people who are here, and to just say in just a couple of sentences, what brings you satisfaction? What's the greatest sense of accomplishment, satisfaction that you have working and trying to support others? What are the biggest challenges that you have? And why is it so important that you're here today? So let's split up into some groups. Amy's going to split us up, and we'll just take a couple minutes to introduce ourselves to each other.
And I just want to let everyone know, so we're about to open breakout rooms. That means you're going to get a little notification on your screen on the Zoom window that offers you to join a room. Click that button. It'll transfer you to a little Zoom window where it's just you and 2 or 3 other people. And then we're going to close the rooms after 2 minutes, and then you'll come back to the main session.
Okay, so if you see something pop up on your screen, click it. If you're still in here, that means that you probably got something on your screen that you want to click to get yourself into that small group. Bibiana, I think you are the last one. If there's something on your screen that says join the breakout group, you should go ahead and click that join button.
Bibiana might not be at the computer.
Right.
Just broadcasting them the instructions.
I see. You see that, Amy? I was born to be a natural just MC.
Yeah.
I should like be doing bar mitzvahs and stuff, just walking around being like, and where's the birth? Where? Amy, I can't see if everyone's back. Can you just let me know?
Everyone's back.
Oh, all right, great. Welcome back, everyone. I hope it was nice to meet the other people who are here. We're going to keep moving along because we've got a whole bunch of stuff that I want to make sure that we get through. So we're not going to share too much of this, but I feel like every time that we go into one of these things and you start to talk to the other people here, you start to say like, oh, wow, I'm not alone in this. Like the reasons that I'm here overlap with a lot of the reasons why other people are here. And also the reasons that I'm scared about being here overlap with the reasons why other people are scared to be here. I think that's actually really powerful. I think it's really important because substance use, whether it's your own or your loved ones, is a really isolating experience. And I think it's really nice to be able to look around, even if it's looking around a Zoom room and saying, hey, there are all these people here. And they're going through the same thing that I'm going through. They're struggling with the same thing that I struggle with. I'm not alone. So, tell you a little bit about the Foundation for Change. The CMC Foundation for Change is an offshoot of the Center for Motivation and Change, which is where I work. And the mission of the Foundation for Change is to get effective and accessible evidence-based tools around change to families and loved ones of those struggling with substance use. Really straightforward here. You all are an underserved population. There is just not enough information out there for families. There is not enough support for families. And we are aiming to change that. Because as Barbara was saying, like, craft has been around for a while. Craft is known. It's not known by all of you. I bet there are very few of you, if any. I would actually be pretty surprised if even one person raised their hand and said, yeah, the first person I went to when I looked up for support sent me to a craft therapist. But it's there. It exists. Why isn't that the case? Why aren't people saying, yeah, well, here's another option. Here's craft. Because we don't know about it, right? And that's the problem that we're aiming to solve with the Foundation for Change. We're also trying to create a sense of community because, as I said, this is isolating. And when you're isolated, when you are alone, all of it feels that much worse, that much more horrible, that much more weight on your shoulders. And so one of the things that CMC FFC is doing is creating a community for family members, for individuals who are looking to help, even for therapists who are looking to learn about this, to learn more, to be able to say, here's a space that you can come and get more information and get more support. We're looking to change the conversation around substance use from the one of shame and isolation to compassion and engagement. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more, so I'm not going to spend much time on that one. And finally, we're going to encourage hope and compassion. That's what we want, because there is a space for hope. And if you read our book, Beyond Addiction, the first chapter is called A Hope in Hell. Because, right, it feels that way. It feels like there's no hope. But there is. And we have the evidence and we have the science and we have the research behind it to show that there is some hope. And that when you can hold hope, when you can create space for hope and compassion for all, which includes compassion for yourself, compassion for your loved one who's struggling, compassion for other people who are in this struggle with you, it makes the process significantly easier and it increases the odds that the outcomes can be positive. So that's the mission of the Foundation for Change. let's talk about substance use. This is around the whole United States, substance use disorder by age. And if you see, this is from 2020. So the studies from 2020. So we're looking at the 2019, in the past year, from 2019 to 2020, in the past month for cigarettes. We can see substance use is prevalent across the board. Tends to rise in those 18 to 25-year-old years. Tends to go down a little bit after that when you get a little bit older, except for cigarettes, but that's a whole nother ball of wax right now. And I think the most interesting piece of this little graph here is this over here all the way on the right. Opioids get so much attention because of the overdosing. The media has picked it up. Look at how small that is compared to marijuana, or certainly to alcohol. Is that the biggest killers, the biggest problem issues that we have continue to be alcohol, continues to be alcohol. Right? In sheer numbers, it eclipses opioid significantly. And so we need to be thinking about all of this. We should not be thinking about this as, right, all right, well, let's just focus on opioids, or let's just focus on alcohol. We have to think about this as a larger pervasive issue that's still out facing all of us.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yes, absolutely.
Your top age range is 26 plus. If you threw up 50 plus, the elder group, you'd see a huge spike probably in alcohol. I'm not sure about the other ones. Is that true?
You know, I don't have the answer to that because I don't know exactly how SAMHSA, who gathers this data on a yearly basis, is breaking this up. It's an excellent question. My guess is that if we broke it up into some more age groups, we would find that some of these numbers start to skew in different ways. Probably, actually, opioids would go up even a little bit higher because there's a lot more pain issues that would come up, and so pain medications could be part of the opioid piece, but I don't have that specific answer.
Thank you.
Yeah. So this is going to sound probably pretty familiar to many of you, that when you are concerned about a loved one, this is what you hear under typical situations. The first thing would be, oh, you should go to Al-Anon. Or you should go to Nar-Anon. This is the space for you. No real conversation about like, well, how do you think about this? What do you want? Just, that's where you should go. And when you get there, they're going to tell you some things that is part of their belief, right? And this goes across the board. Again, not individualized for you, but across the board. They're going to say, you need to detach with love, meaning step away from your loved one. Leave them alone. You can't do this for them. You can't encourage them. So you need to walk away. You also need to stop enabling. I don't know what you've been doing or why you've been doing it, but by the way, you're enabling, you're hurting them, and stop. And finally, while we're at it, you also have a problem yourself. That problem is called codependence. You won't find it in any diagnostic criteria because it's not a thing that you can diagnose, because it's not actually a diagnosable issue. But you've got it, don't worry. And you should fix that. Those don't feel great to me, especially if I'm sitting there saying, I'm not sure, A, what any of those mean, or B, that I'm doing that. But here I am coming to an expert and saying like, well, what should I do? And they're telling me all of this. Oh, that's tough. The other thing that people are told is, oh, you should do an intervention or send them away. They need to go to rehab. Well, interventions, I've seen them on TV and they look pretty hard and like they seem kind of harsh. So you might not be interested in doing that. Or you might feel like, oh, that feels just like that feels too many steps away. I just found my child smoking pot. It's the first time I've ever found any of this. I got to send them to rehab? I got to send them to a wilderness program? Oh, I'm not sure about that. And then the last one is, so sorry to hear that. There's nothing you can do. They have to hit bottom, and you have to let them do that. That's the only way that this works. And that one, to me, that one is the most insidious. That one's the hardest one. Because for me, I hear that and I hear, all right, so I'm going to risk a person I love potentially dying. I'm going to risk them. I'm going to say, nope, you're on your own for this. I can't do that. I can't. And then if you say that, they're going to say, oh, well, back to that. Well, you're enabling and you're codependent. It's like, well, that's so odd. Family members are blamed more for causing the problem and held responsible for fixing it. And in the case of addiction, it's your fault that you haven't fixed it. If your child is struggling, it means that you've done something wrong. It's blame and shame. But here's the reality, is that it's totally normal to try and be helpful if you see a loved one who's hurting themselves. That's not enabling or codependent. That's normal. That's love. And it's normal to want to protect people we love from consequences. Who doesn't? I don't know most of you or any of you, really, and I want to protect you from consequences. Right? That's a normal human response. Why is that somehow a problem? And it's normal to be anxious and distrustful of others when we're being stigmatized and discriminated for simply being in a relationship with someone who is struggling. How am I going to talk to you about my problems if I'm just sitting there waiting for you to judge me? Because you're going to tell me that this is a problem. And finally, it is really normal to hope against hope, that things are not as bad as they seem. Like maybe I will wake up and it will be a dream. Maybe I will wake up and I will not be dealing with this. My loved one, my child, this person I care about won't be in this situation. Oh God, that would be great. These are normal things that as family members, as loved ones, as helpers, it is normal to feel and it is normal to want. And yet it is pathologized. So let's take the bigger context. Substance use can be a devastating problem. This is just fact. And most people are not getting help. In fact, year over year, they say about 10% of the people who qualify for substance use disorders, qualify as needing treatment, engage in any kind of treatment. Only about 10%. And that families are suffering tremendously with no real idea what to do and no tools. Well, maybe they do have some tools, but not the tools they need, not the tools that are effective. Even though we know that there are tools that help and that you all can learn them. And when I say help, I mean tools that will help get loved ones into treatment, to stay in treatment, and or to actually start changing their substance use. And we know what these tools are. So we got to make sure that you have them. By the way, if anybody has questions, just like Saul did before, you got to just chime up because I can't see everybody's. So if anybody's like raising a hand or anything like that, I'm not going to see you do that. So you just unmute yourself and jump in and ask your questions. Like I said, I'm hoping that this is going to be nice and collaborative, and that if you have questions, feel free to just jump in with them. So what's the invitation to change model? This is a model that anyone can learn. Anyone, lay people like yourselves, parents, siblings, grandparents, clergy, first responders, teachers. This is for everyone, including addiction treatment providers. And I think that's important. If mostly we have, in fact, if all we have in this room are family members, you can go into people who are treating you and say, here's this book, here's information about this, here's this website, and I would really like you to learn this so that you can help me better. So this is something that everyone can learn and everyone can start to use. And the invitation to change, which we're just going to keep calling the ITC from here on out, too many words. The ITC is all about evidence-based concepts and strategies. This is all based off of research, things that we know work. And it's a combination of mainly three different treatments. There's CRAFT, which is the community reinforcement and family training, which was the first of its kind and just such a powerful treatment, specifically for families, focused on how do we help get loved ones into treatment or to start changing their substance use, while also actually staying engaged and talking to and taking care of ourselves. And then we threw in here, we added in motivational interviewing, which is the leading, by far, the leading treatment for getting an individual into treatment. Right? And it's about building up somebody's own motivation to change, to engage in new behaviors. We also added in ACT, which is acceptance and commitment therapy, which is all about creating psychological flexibility. How do I kind of move within the stuff that is just going to be thrown at me all the time? How do I sit with some of the pain and some of the difficulty that life throws at me while continuing to move towards the things that are my values, the things I care about, to live the life that I want to live, right? And part of that can be helping somebody who I care about who's struggling. So if I had to put this in like the most simple terms, I would say the ITC is really saying, let's take the science, let's add in kindness. And when we do that, we make change. But first, we need to think about what is helping. What do we mean when we're talking about helping? What does that look like? Helping in this is a process. It's not a set of answers. I can't sit here and say to you, all right, if you do this, right, all of a sudden, your kid's not going to be as interested in using substances. If you do this, they're going to change their mind. That, if I had that, I would definitely give it to you, but I don't. So instead, I want to change the way that we think about helping. I want to change it to be not a set of answers, but a process that says, all right, first of all, how do I understand the behaviors and the motivation of why they're doing things and how they're doing things? How do I do that in a different way? And then can I develop self-awareness and self-compassion for myself as I'm struggling through, how do I incorporate this into my own life? How do I communicate in different ways that's going to encourage change? And how do I create the conditions for long-term positive change? Notice it's not, how do I stop them from using? Because if I had that answer, again, I would give it to you, right? But I can't, because we don't have that ability to just stop someone, but we do have the ability to do all of these. And all of this creates a fertile ground for change to happen. So if we looked at the whole ITC, this is what it would look like. We have 3 different sections to the ITC: understanding, awareness, and action. And then right in the middle, smack dab in the middle, is practice, because what we do know is that you don't get to be good at this just by sitting in 3 hours of having me talk with you. You don't get to be good at this because you bought a book once and you read it through. You get to be good at this because you practiced and it was hard and you kept going and you kept trying it and you got better and better over time. So we're going to go through some of this wheel today. We're not going to get through everything. To go through everything is like a whole weekend. And to be quite honest, even then, it's probably doing it more than that. But we're going to spend today talking about understanding and a little bit of action. Because if I had to think about what, if somebody said to me, all right, Josh, give me 5 minutes of conversation, what is the most helpful thing I can do? I would say the most helpful thing that you can do is to understand where your child is coming from, why they are engaging in these behaviors that you think are just so friggin' nuts, and to be able to look at it from a different perspective so that you can see them in a different light. And then the second thing is to change the way that we're engaging with them from everything being about, oh, and here's another thing you did wrong, to actually saying, how do we make things right? How do we get you into a space where you're doing more of the things that feels good? So that's what we're going to focus on today.
Josh, one of the things I think that made me sort of think differently was to think that my child was as equally as afraid as I was. Even though he was showing all this bravado, he was also frightened underneath. And that made me think differently about being angry all the time. So,
yeah. When you shift that understanding to be able to look at a person who is sitting there struggling and be able to say, oh, you're not doing this just because you're being like a total jerk or you don't care about me, but that you don't know what else to do. You're terrified. Suddenly, I'm not as angry anymore. And when I'm not as angry anymore, you know what I am? I'm a significantly better helper. I can help more if I'm not sitting there being super angry. And all of that comes from shifting the understanding. So let's get into it. We're going to jump into behaviors make sense. Before we do, just want to check and see if anybody else has any more questions. Just go ahead and unmute yourself and jump right in. No? All right. Here we go. Behaviors make sense. I'm just, quick check of hands. Did any of you ever touch burning hot metal? Michelle, put your hand down. We know that's not true. Okay. We don't do that. Right? We tend not, I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. We tend not to do that. Right? We tend not to do that on purpose. And certainly if we do it by mistake, we tend not to go back to do it again. Why? Because if you touched a hot plate, you touched something that's really hot, it hurts. And it doesn't feel like you don't get something from it. It's not like you're saying, oh man, that was great. It's just negative. So right, you touch something that's hot, it's just negative. You don't do that again. So when we talk about kids who are using, what parents experience and what they hear from other people is like, why is she doing this? Or substance use is self-destructive and crazy, which is implying, by the way, that your kid is self-destructive and crazy. Maybe, do they know how much this hurts us? Right? What is she thinking? It makes no sense. But what if we took a different perspective? What if we shifted this? We said, let's totally change this and look at it from another perspective, right? Because everything here suggests that there's no benefit, right? But like we said, if using substances was like touching a hot stove, we wouldn't do it. They would have stopped already. Behavior, even when it's destructive behavior, is motivated by reinforcement. It's why we repeat behaviors. We don't repeat things that aren't reinforced in some way, where we don't get something out of it. So what if I told you that I could give you something that would give you all of this, that would help you mellow out, feel less depressed, feel good, right? Take away boredom and your physical pain, help you feel funny and social, cut down your anxiety, help you face the day and sleep well. What if I told you I could do that for you? You in? Would you want that? There's a lot of nodding heads that I'm seeing. People would be into this. What if I told you this is what somebody gets from using substances? This is what makes it not a hot stove. Right? Hot stove doesn't make you more likely to face the day or to sleep well. A hot stove doesn't help your physical pain or make you feel better or help you chill out. But substances can. Substances can cut down that anxiety and help you lose weight and feel like you're a part of a group. So they speak of my drinking, but never of my thirst. We focus on the part of this that's a problem, and we don't focus on the part of it that says, what are you getting? Right? If you were in a desert and the only thing that was offered to you was a beer, you'd take it. Now, if you're in an emotional desert where you're saying, I am parched. I'm parched for connection. I'm parched for feeling good. I'm parched for sleep. And here is this oasis that's being offered to me. I know there's a consequence, but man, I really want to take it. How does this help us? Well, it offers a whole bunch of emotional positives, right? It helps parents, helps all of you, not take the behavior as personally, right? This is what Barbara was saying, right? Oh, you're not doing this just because you don't care what I have to say. You're doing this because you are significantly benefiting from this. There's some part of this that it really, truly helps you. That's confusing to my brain, right? It makes me just like a little bit flabbergasted. But it's a real help to you. And when I realized that, all right, this isn't about you not caring about me. It's about you actually trying to get through the day. It's about you trying to figure out, how do I move forward? How do I get what I want? How do I feel like my life is working? When we have that, parents' empathy for the behavior and the child goes up, because now I feel bad. God, like what a hard life that is, to feel like you don't have any of those things. What a very difficult position for you to be in. And if we can understand that, it actually increases collaboration in both directions. Excuse me.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you feel like you have to get to this place though?
What do you mean?
You know what I mean? Like where it says parent the empathy for the behavior. Do you have to get to this place? Because like in my case, I'll get personal. I did not understand opioid addiction at all.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So and it took me a long time to get here without feeling frustrated, angry, or mad, or wanted to just disconnect, not feel, not care. So, you know, like you saying, giving us this, do you feel like you have to get to this place for you to feel this empathy for the behavior? Like,
I think I understand. And I would say yes. It's not just hearing me say, no, it makes sense, is not going to all of a sudden be, all right, now I've got empathy for the person. That's not going to do it. And a lot of the other tools that we're going to talk about, or that are going to come up if you do a longer training, would actually really be about how do we get to that, right? So a lot of the communication tools are about, how do I talk to you about substance use openly? And to actually say to you something like, so what do you get out of this? Because you know what no one has ever told you to say in any Al-Anon meeting ever? You should ask them what they get, what are the benefits that they get out of substance use. And again, I'm not here to like dog on Al-Anon, because any support that works for anybody, I'm a fan of. Right? I just, all I care about is that people are getting the support that they need and that works for them. But I've also seen firsthand how much it changes families when you ask that. First of all, the person, the substance using person, who we often label as the identified patient, because that's the person who we identify as like, oh, you're the one with the problem. So the identified patient is often so thrown off because no one's ever asked them that. And then they're a little more open. They're like, do you really want to hear this? Right, I'm going to tell you. And then if you can respond, and again, this is stuff that we teach, if you can respond by saying like, oh, wow, I never really thought about that. I'm not here to argue you or to try to disprove it, but I'm here to like listen and to understand, really hear you. Right? Now they're going to, all right, wow, I've got a different relationship with you. And you have a different relationship with them. And so the empathy increases when we start to hear, right? How does this actually play out for you? What do you get? What is missing in your life that you're not getting? And how does this fill that hole? And then the collaboration increases when you're saying, all right, I'm actually listening to you more now. And now we can actually work together on like trying to figure out, well, how do we help you with that?
Josh, can I make a comment?
Absolutely.
I know you're using a lot in your comments, you're using a lot of the example of parent facing an addicted child. That happens to be a situation I find myself in. And I just want to, and I know there are, both people on this training that are maybe in my situation, as well as many therapeutic workers here of, various backgrounds. I just want to acknowledge that when I look at what you have on the screen here, I think you're kind of preparing how would a parent, or let's say somebody who cares about an addict, think about realigning their approach and interaction. I just want to acknowledge that in the case of parents and children, I think there is a dynamic which would be very different if a therapist in a clinical setting were dealing with an addict, meaning that there is this lifelong connection between the parent and child. Having been down the road with my child, he associates a lot of what drove him to addiction to the parenting he got in the last 20 plus years. So there's this very loaded, you know, you talk about building empathy and recognizing that behaviors make sense. And when I go to my child and I said, why are you doing it? He said, because you've never supported me. And now we get into this vicious cycle, which would not be the case if any of the therapists in this group were dealing with an addict that came into their office for therapeutic treatment, because there would be that disassociated relationship with the addict. I'm hoping that perhaps later on today, you may speak more specifically about that unusual inside the family dynamic versus, you know, anybody, just a friend or
I can actually address some of that right here. So first thing, and I hope that this is going to come across not as chastising, because we haven't actually talked about any of this, but I want to help you and help us as a group actually shift some of our language, right? So yeah. I don't want to refer to people as addicts.
Okay.
Right? Because I don't want to call somebody a label. I don't talk about, you know, oh, the depressives, right? I don't want to call somebody about something that they're struggling with. So I'm going to call people, you know, somebody who's struggling, or the identified patient, or even just talking about my kid, right? That language actually matters quite a bit, because there's a lot that is associated with being an addict, right? There's not a lot of super positive associations that everybody has, like, oh man, gotta love that guy, right? Look at, we call him the addict because he's the greatest, right? That's never the case. And so there's all the negative associations, and I don't want to lump that onto anybody. The second thing that you just brought up, which is, right, that idea of, oh, well, why are you doing this? And then them saying, well, because of you, Dad. And I think that part of this is about changing the question. Not why are you doing this, but you are doing this. What are you getting out of it? Right? Well, can't it really answer what are you getting out of it and say, I'm getting back at you. I mean, I guess they could say I'm getting back at you, but that's unlikely to be the response. Right? What do you benefit from this? And when I sit with somebody individually as a therapist, that's the question that I ask. I don't ask, why are you doing this? I say, well, you are doing it, and you're clearly doing it for a reason. I know that. I want to understand what those reasons are, and I want to understand what you benefit from this. What do you benefit from substance use? What does it do for you? What do you get out of it? And as soon as I start to ask that question, it actually takes on a very different flavor. It shifts the communication to be exactly what you were talking about. It's less about, you know, oh, like you and your upbringing, and like how you've been wronged by your family. And it changes it a little bit more to be understanding and open. Right? There's not an argumentative or like an undercurrent of like, why are you doing this thing that I think is so stupid, or that is stupid, that I wish you would stop? It's actually taking a more neutral stance that says, I would like to understand. Mm-hmm. And I think if you can shift the way that you're asking that question, and again, this is all actually stuff that is, I'm so glad that you asked that question. I love this question, but this is the stuff that's in the longer trainings. And so I highly encourage, if you like what you're hearing today, and if you're like, all right, this is like a very cool or very interesting introduction, that you say, hey, I would really like to do this other longer training. Can I find out more about it? Because this is where we're going to go into all of this stuff. But that's how we start to shift, is to say, I'm not going to come in here trying to convince you not to use. Because every time I try to do that, it only makes you more likely to say, I'm going to use. And we're going to get into that in just a little bit. But if I come in and say, all right, if I'm not trying to get you not to use, and I just want to understand, I just want to understand you, and I want to understand your experience, that's going to shift the conversation. Does that help?
Yeah, it's a big help. I think just the shift from that, why are you doing this, to what are you benefiting? That's it sounds very subtle on the surface, but I understand the power of that shift. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that question. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Are there more questions? No? All right, I'm gonna keep going because we got a little video here to just help us look at the behaviors make sense piece. Nope, what happened? That was not play. There we go.
Imagine this scenario.
Just give me a thumbs up if you can
You're
hear
walking down the side of a two-way street when you look up and see a person trying to cross. There's plenty of
Oh, sorry. Now you can't hear anything. Hang on.
Imagine this scenario. You're walking down the side of a two-way street when you look up and see a person trying to cross. There's plenty of traffic and you can hear cars and trucks whooshing by. The person you noticed looks impatient, upset, frantic, and does not seem to be considering the danger ahead of them. Instead, all they seem to be concerned about is getting to the other side of the street. Take a moment to consider the following. What are your thoughts and feelings about this person and their behavior? And what are some actions that those thoughts and feelings make you want to take? You may be thinking, what's wrong with them? What's making them crazy enough to try and cross traffic without thinking? Are they dangerous? You may be feeling scared for what's about to happen, anxious for the person you're watching, and confused by their behavior. Some actions you may want to consider include moving away from the situation by leaving so you don't have to see the person get hurt, or engaging in the situation by yelling at them to stop to try to promote a positive outcome. Continue imagining the same scenario, only now I'll give you a little bit more information. Before you saw this person, they had been driving further down the road with their dog in the back seat. At a stoplight, the dog jumped out of the car and began running through traffic. The person is now frantically trying to get the dog back inside of the car before it gets hurt. Now take a moment to consider the following. What are your thoughts and feelings about this person after learning about their reason for trying to cross such a busy street? What are some actions those thoughts and feelings make you want to take? You might be thinking, how can I help this person? How do I keep him safe when he's upset and not thinking about his own safety? You might be feeling compassion, sadness for the person's situation, and fear it might go badly. You may be more inclined to take action by offering to help, calling for more help, or trying to intervene in some way. The purpose of this exercise is to show that when another person's behavior seems irrational or erratic or scary in some way, in the way that substance use often does, it can push us into a let me get away from this or make it stop response, and make us want to move away from it entirely. It can be hard to see how to be helpful in these situations or to even want to help, while also experiencing our own set of thoughts and emotions as a bystander. By taking a moment to put the behaviors into a larger context, by understanding the why behind their behavior, we can start to make sense of the motivation behind them. We can then decide on a productive way to move forward. So let's think back to the scenario we just imagined. If we start off deciding that the person running in the road is doing it just because they're crazy, then we are also limiting ourselves from seeing the full picture. This way of thinking is natural, but does not facilitate positive action on our part. Instead, if we decide that the person trying to cross the road has a valid or a sympathetic reason for their behavior, we open ourselves up to more understanding. We can now accept new information and learn that the person is trying to find their dog. This information will most likely shift our thoughts and emotions surrounding the behavior, and we'll then be able to come up with and want to come up with a productive plan on how to help them. Finally, let's put this all in the context of substance use. If we decide that a person who is using substances is doing so just because they are an addict, aka a morally bankrupt, irresponsible person, we will very effectively shut out information that could help us understand their behaviors. And without that understanding, we won't be able to find a constructive way to offer support. However, if we open ourselves up to understanding that all behaviors make sense, we will learn that people use substances for valid reasons. Examples could include using substances to ease anxiety, feel more ready to handle daily life, or get to sleep despite physical pain. This type of information will then help us begin moving forward by supporting our loved ones in a productive way.
So what are your thoughts?
Very powerful. Is this video on YouTube?
This video is on YouTube, yes.
Could somebody working with you here post the link in the chat? Is that possible?
Great question.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I'm coming.
Yeah. I think it's very powerful, and it's like such a, light bulb moment. It's kind of like you listen to the narrative and say, oh God, why didn't I thought I was a smart person. Why don't I consciously think of this? I just want to throw out one more question, and I hate to be the one always raising questions here, but there is this idea of understanding what these identified patients, the benefit they see in their behaviors, and showing the empathy. There is a certain implied amount of time that takes, whereas occasionally, I just want to throw this out there, you're dealing with somebody who has just walked in with pills purchased on the street that have a very high chance of being laced with fentanyl, and there has to be some kind of immediacy of an intervention, and perhaps that will also not be covered in today's session, but I kind of want to understand how one remains empathic and connected, etc., but occasionally needs to almost police a situation. Yeah.
And I think the short answer to that is, first of all, I would absolutely, if fentanyl is a potential issue, if that's a thing that might be coming into your house, I would make sure that you have fentanyl strips. I would make sure you have naloxone. I would make sure that's known where that is. And so the first thing I can say is, you have pills that you just bought. All right, have you tested them with the fentanyl strips? Here you are. Here you go. I want to make sure that you have those. The second thing is, that's not the moment that I'm trying to ask for. Like, can you tell me what you get out of this?
Yeah, right.
Doing that for times when the pressure is low. Right. So I'm doing that at the times when the pressure is low, and we have a lot of those times.
Right.
And in that moment of, oh, you just walked in the house with pills, I'm thinking about, how do I make sure that you are as safe as possible, knowing that I only have so much ability to impact what you're doing. Thanks.
Thank you.
Lisa, I think you had something?
No, I just was agreeing with the video and how impactful it is.
Yeah. It's a pretty crazy thing. And I encourage everyone to be a little bit, thinking about that self-compassion, be kind to yourself. If everyone just knew all of this stuff immediately, we wouldn't be here doing this training, because you would all know it. But they don't give out guidebooks on, how to handle these situations and how to talk to people when you have a kid, or when you are, first dealing with this. They just say to you, like, do your best. So that's all we can do. Kathleen, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to, first of all, I'm Kathleen Leake, I'm a parent advisor with Families Together in New York State. And I am the mother of a son who passed away from complications due to severe mental illness and substance misuse. I think one of the biggest things we have to get out of this, and I think you're definitely saying this so much, and it's so important, is that, our children or our loved ones don't just wake up one day and say, I think I want to become addicted to something, right? I think the biggest piece of this, and is exactly what you said, is trying to help them recognize, find out why they're doing what they're doing that's so destructive. But on the other hand, I found out a few things after the fact. So I think that it takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of therapy. It takes a lot of work in trying to communicate with that person that is misusing substances. Because sometimes I think, you know, they may have started to use something thinking, okay, well, I'll just use this a little bit. And then depending if they, you know, were predetermined to have substance use, misuse disorder, it got out of control quickly. And I think that, you know, the data has proven, or facts have proven, that people that misuse, whether it's substances or any type of addiction, definitely deflect back onto the people that love them most, because they don't want to take, you know, the responsibility. It's somebody else's fault as to why they're doing this.
Right.
So one of the things I wanted to say to Saul was, don't take it personally when your loved one says that it's your fault. Because I think it hurts. It's hard to hear that. And I've heard that myself. So I think it's just recognize and that there's a root to this problem, and it just doesn't appear overnight. And sometimes it's hard to find what that root is if the person won't talk about it, won't share, maybe doesn't really know themselves sometimes, you know. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Kathleen. And
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I tend to be less interested in, well, how did you end up here? With, okay, now you're here. So why are you maintaining it? What are you getting out of this? What is it doing for you? It may have started out with, I just wanted to try it once, but you kept going back. And you kept going back, I'm sure, for a reason, because, right, behaviors make sense. Your behaviors make sense in some way that I don't understand. And I want to understand it.
I have a question again now, since you said, is it the type of drug use that keeps them going back? Like, I'm under the impression that the drug keeps them going back. Is that the case? You think the way you putting it is like, it's a choice that they keep, there's a reason that it keeps going back. Is it not the addiction that keeps them going back?
So it's a great question. And I would say that they are one in the same here, right? Because there are some points where somebody might say, and I'll use opiates as an example, I keep using because when I try to stop, the withdrawal is so terrible and it's so uncomfortable that I'm terrified of that. And so I keep doing it. Now, if I heard that, I would say, oh, that's wonderful. Because we have ways to help that. There are medications that can help you with that. But I think once you peel that layer away, you're still going to get to the next layer, which is like, all right, well, now why did I start it in the first place? And how did I get that far down the road? So I have to keep asking and saying, so what do you get? Like, what else did you get about it, right? What else besides avoiding withdrawal? What else did you get? Because there's almost always some answer there where it's like, yeah, well, here are the other things I got out of it. And that's typically, if you get to that point, right, if you're at that point where you have a physical addiction, where there's you're going to experience withdrawal, right? You've been doing it for quite some time, and you've gone far enough down the road, and you were getting something else out of it at that time because you didn't have that physical piece. You don't get that after using it once. All right, let's keep going to this idea of one size doesn't fit all. And this is some of the stuff that people typically hear. You know those addicts, they're all the same. He has an addictive personality, which, by the way, I'll just dispel this myth. In all of the research on personalities and personality types and personality disorders, addictive personality, not one of them. So we just don't have that. But that's a thing that we hear. He has an addictive personality. Or maybe you're codependent, right? That's why this is happening. You're codependent. And we talked a little bit about that one. If he doesn't go to rehab, he will die. That's the answer. She needs to hit rock bottom before she'll listen, and you need to go to Al-Anon. Right? These are pretty common things that people hear. But if we actually shift the perspective, if we take this and move it around and we say, gosh, behavior in general is complex. We're not so simple beings. We're not such simple beings that we just do everything, it's one size. Oh, this is what happens. This happened, and then you're going to respond this way. That's not typically the way that it works. The behaviors are much more complex than that. That people enter into and leave substance use for many different reasons. And those reasons are different reinforcements. That different strategies work for different people. I would never expect that every single person in here is going to connect with every single thing that I say just exactly the way that I say it, that sometimes I have to say it in 3 different ways. Or sometimes I have to say, all right, you're not going to connect on this topic, but maybe you'll connect on this one. Because you're all different human beings with different experiences and different backgrounds and different understandings of the world. So different strategies are going to work for each one of you. That support is much more powerful if individual circumstances are recognized. Meaning, right, if I can recognize that, hey, what you're going through in your life is different from what they're going through, and so let's make sure that this fits you based off of the situations and the issues that you have, that's going to be more powerful than if I say, nope, this is just what you get. Here you go. And that help is much more likely to be taken if there's multiple paths, if there's multiple options that are offered. Right? If somebody says to me, well, Josh, you have to lose weight, and the only way to do it is to start running more. I'm going to say, well, then I guess I'm not going to lose any weight because I really hate running. I think running is stupid. No one's chasing me, and I'm not chasing anybody else. So I'm not sure why I would run. And so if that's the only way to do this, we've got a big problem. But if they say, well, here's 5 different ways that you could lose weight, right? You can eat differently, you can exercise, you can run, you can reduce the amount of carbs, and you can start eating more whole grains. Like, all right, well, some of those I could do. Not going to run. I can rule that one out. But I've got other options, so I'm more likely to take one of them. So what do we know? How does this help us as helpers? Well, if we're going to try and provide lots of options for people, then that must mean that there must be lots of options that work. And if we know that there are different ways to help and that you don't have to just do one thing, you do not have to go to Al-Anon if you don't want to. They do not have to go to rehab if that doesn't make sense for your family. Right? You don't have to do those things. Then helping can be aligned with your own values, with the things that you care about, with things that you know about your loved one. That's hope right there. Right? Think about how many of the people that you know or that you've talked to or that you've experienced where they say, we tried rehab once, it didn't work. I'm like, okay. But what if I said rehab's just one out of an infinite number of ways to help? Oh, okay, that's helpful. But if I thought that's the only thing and we tried it and it didn't work, well, then I'm screwed. So this is about adding hope by saying there's a lot of ways to do this. And if there's lots of ways to do it, it increases flexibility in how families can help. And flexibility is super duper helpful. When we have this understanding that one size doesn't fit all, it allows for options and choices. And when we have options and choices, as I just explained, it increases collaboration, it increases buy-in, and it decreases black and white, jam them in the corner. What, you want me to go to rehab? Hell no, you don't understand me at all. It reduces that reaction, right? If the only way that you can respond is to say, no, you cannot drink ever again, well, then I'm not talking to you. But if we say, all right, well, let's think about lots of different ways to increase the benefits that you're getting in other places in your life that might compete with drinking. All right, that's a lot of options. So this idea of one size doesn't fit all helps us as helpers because we gain more flexibility, we gain more options, we gain more hope, and it brings them in. So here's another little video for us.
Thank you for calling Shoes, Shoes, Shoes. How may I be of assistance?
Hi, I ordered a pair of dress shoes for my son, and he was sent the wrong size.
I'm not sure I understand.
The shoes you sent just don't fit.
Did you try putting them on?
Yeah, we've been trying all morning. It's just not working.
Well, other people have been able to make that size work without a problem.
I don't know what we're doing wrong. They just seem way too big.
To be frank, in my experience, if your son really wanted the shoes, he would put them on and wear them until they fit.
No, he really wants these ones, but these won't even stay on his feet.
Ma'am, I'm sorry to hear that you and your son are unable to commit to making these shoes work, but we're confident we've given you the best option available.
This makes no sense to me.
Well, I can give you the number of another shoe company, but they'll tell you the same thing. Unless he can accept our shoe size, we can't help. And honestly, it seems like you're way over involved in this. You need to stop cutting him so much slack. Let him know that if he doesn't want those shoes, he can just go barefoot.
He really needs help. His using is just out of control, and I'm afraid that something really bad might happen. But I just don't think that he's going to agree to go for 30 days. I just don't see that happening.
Well, taking the full 30 days is really important. Other people have been able to take the time needed without a problem. If it was important to him to get sober, he would be able to make this a priority.
I really want to help him with this. I mean, he says that it's really important for him to be someplace that also can work with his PTSD. I don't know if that's the best thing to do, but that's what he says would be really helpful.
I'm sorry to say this, but addicts come up with all kinds of excuses to avoid actually getting help. I'm not so sure that it's as much about PTSD as it is a case of terminal uniqueness.
I don't really think that's what's going on. I mean, I don't know, but I don't think that that's the case. I just think that he's scared, and I just don't know what we're doing wrong.
You called us because we're the experts, and frankly, I want to give you some direct feedback because we see this all the time. You're clearly way over-involved here, and codependency is part of this for you. I think you need to take a step back and realize that your son could die if you don't get him into rehab. You have to stop giving him so many options. Tell him he can go to rehab, or you're kicking him out of the house.
A shoe company telling us to just make it fit would be ridiculous. But many families have experienced this exact scenario, only with much higher stakes. Families are trying to help using their deep understanding of the situation, but are being repeatedly told to just make it fit. This one-size-fits-all approach is demeaning and harmful, and being treated this way can be discouraging and heartbreaking. We all deserve to be seen and heard when we're seeking help.
Thoughts?
Wow.
Yeah, wow. Yeah.
I assume the wow is not just for my spectacular acting in that video.
Can I speak?
It just makes so much sense.
It's enraging as a parent that's going through this currently with a teenager. It's very discouraging and enraging. It's appalling. It needs to change. It's very biased. I can say a lot.
I agree with literally everything that you're saying. It is appalling. It is frustrating. It is aggravating. It is unacceptable.
Yep.
Except that it's completely accepted.
Yep.
I was on a family call last night with a major well-known treatment center. And what I heard and what I hear on every Tuesday night call is mimicking some of what I just heard. And no wonder I just don't feel right being on that call. I'm just, some things have got to change. Yeah.
And you know, the crazy thing is, Denise was saying, like, oh my God, like I hear this in those calls, right? We didn't make any of that up. We didn't create the idea of terminal uniqueness. That's not our word. We didn't create this setup or make it up so that we could have something nice for a video. We unfortunately were able to pull from information that we have heard from other people who are saying, this is what I was told.
Josh, this video was, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say the video was very powerful, made me quite emotional. And, you know, in addition to the comments that were just made, I realized that I myself have been that shoe store customer service person with my child, or that rehab rep, in terms of saying, you know, everybody else can make this shoe fit, why can't you? Everybody else can do this, why can't you? This is the way it has to be. And, you know, I guess one gets this from professionals who one may seek to help with this situation, but we ourselves as the caregivers, let's say, do this.
Yeah, because that's how we were taught. I mean, that's exactly how we were taught to deal with, or how I was taught to deal with my son.
Right.
And I think, again, we're back to that idea of the self-compassion. Being able to say, how can I be compassionate to myself, to say, I was doing the best that I could. I didn't have a ton of information. I didn't have the other information. And, you know, again, it's not like you can hop online and be like, what's the best way to help somebody with substance use? And then you find, you know, ITC or craft. You don't. You got to get them into rehab right now or they're going to die. And then you call up the number that says, we're going to help you because you need to hear this right this second. And you as a parent are terrified. You're like, well, I better hear this if it says I need to right this second. And then they get on the phone and they do that. And you could even hear the person who was playing the call center was saying, you called me. I'm the expert. And I am telling you, this is what you need. And by the way, any resistance that you're giving to this is just a sign that you're also part of the problem. So it's like, I'm not even allowed to question it. So I have so much empathy for what you all have been through, because I don't know what I would have done. I probably would have said, okay, well, this is what I'm being told. Why the hell would I not listen to the expert? Because I certainly don't know about this. I don't think that most people, I do think there are definitely some, but I don't think most people are out there to try and be cruel or to take advantage. I think that they're doing the best that they can too. Which is why I said at the very beginning, If you like what you're hearing here, you order these books and you go to your therapist and you say, there's going to be, if we're going to keep working together, there's going to be a new way that we're going to have to do this. Here you go. Because they don't know either. We're not teaching craft in graduate school. We're not teaching ITC in graduate school. We're not running, tons of CE credits and continuing education credits for therapists and social workers and clergy and police officers that say, hey, here's this other way of doing this that's significantly more nuanced, that is has higher rates of success. We're not doing that.
Hi, this is Deb Fawkes, and I just wanted to add that in my experience, when a substance abuse or substance misuse treatment doesn't work, the blame is put on the patient, not the system. And that would be like blaming cancer patients who die because they weren't trying hard enough with the chemo. But it's, which would be ridiculous to say, but it's always acceptable to say, well, our treatment plan is rock solid, so obviously your person just wasn't really committed enough to it, rather than this system and treatment was not tailored to the person and what they needed.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. Right. And then what does that turn back on to? Right. All right. Your kid has failed. And right. So now you're going to go back to the kid and be like, well, why? Why couldn't you do this?
Mm-hmm.
And now we're perpetuating it. And now the kid's not going to come to you to talk to you because they're like, listen, you send me to the wrong place and now you're yelling at me that I didn't do it right. And so it perpetuates a cycle of conflict. It's like not super helpful. And that's what we're breaking out of today.
Could I ask again that the link to this video is also shared with us?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
We'll make sure that we share all of the links to the videos.
Yeah.
We'll get that to you. So just kind of think this through together. If you were to think about your loved one or someone who you're trying to help, what are some options for treatment that your loved one might consider? What might be helpful for them and why? For some of them, you might say, oh, yeah, you know what? I really think that they would do great in like a group or even in like a self-help group and like an AA style self-help group. I've been to some, I've seen them, and I think they would be great. For some of you, you'd say, I could never, ever imagine my kid going to do that. And it's not because I don't know them. It's actually because I know that they are so socially anxious that they would never do it. Or they're such a people pleaser, right? They would walk in there, they would just tell everyone what they want and never get anything out of it because they've got that anxiety. Some of you might say, I think my kid would do really well with wilderness. And some of you are like, wilderness? I would never send my kid to a wilderness program. Like, who are you kidding? That's not my kid. Sometimes it's literally just, well, they've never actually seen a therapist. What if we just started there? What resources outside of treatment might be helpful to your loved one? Are there things that they're connected with? Are there teams? Are there community groups that they actually seem to be connected with, that have a really nice group, that have nice people who are helpful? Not helpful for you, but helpful for them. Or who you think they could be connected with. What might be helpful and why? Notice those questions at the end. What might be helpful about it and why would that be helpful? Right now we're tailoring it to this person. What behaviors could help them replace the old behaviors of using? What else can we think of that they connect with, that gives them some of those benefits that we found out that they were getting because behaviors make sense? What else could we do that would replace that? And then what challenges would be there for them? What would be challenging for them about adopting these new behaviors, about seeking support, about accepting support? Let's think about all of that. And then let's actually talk about it with our kids. Right? You know what, kids, I don't know that everybody realizes this. I have got 2 kids, and it took me a long time to realize this. What they don't like so much is that you say, so I figured out this thing that I think would be really great for you. And I've also thought through all of the challenges of it, and I've come up with solutions. So here you go. It's all solved. There you are. Now go do it. They tend not to like that so much. What they like is being part of it, having a conversation, saying, all right, let's think this through together. And then let's see if we could come up with not just 1, but maybe 3 different solutions that you can try out. And then we could come back, we could talk about it and see what worked, what didn't work. So I want to move us forward, and then we're going to take a small break, because if people need it, I think people probably do. There's a lot going on here, but I want to hit ambivalence as normal before we break. And this is, I think, one of the funniest things, because this actually was at a grocery store. Purchase any 6 lean cuisine entrees in a single order and get 1 56-ounce container of Edie's ice cream. That is ambivalence right there. That is it. Right? That's certainly the ambivalence that I'm always running into, and it's so important. And it's just a sign. Ambivalence is everywhere. So here's what they experience when you start to hear ambivalence. Now I will define ambivalence. What you hear is they're not ready, or they're a liar, or, oh, he started to change and then started backsliding. Oh, they're in denial. And if they can get away with it, they're going to keep using. That's just what they're going to do. We change that perspective. We think about this idea. Now, what is ambivalence? If we read it straight out of the dictionary, it says simultaneous and contradictory attitudes or feelings, as in attraction and repulsion, towards an object, person, or action. In other words, I'm pulled to do something and I'm pulled to not do something at the same time. So I've already shared with all of you my feelings on running, which is obviously, I am very against it. And yet, I'm also signed up with my entire family to do a race. I'm pulled to run because I know that running is actually like a pretty healthy thing that you should do. And I'm also pulled to not run because, God, I hate it. I'm pulled in both directions at the same time. I kind of want to, and I also kind of don't. I feel that same way every single morning when I pass by a bagel store, because I love, you know, as I said, I'm in the city. I'm here in Manhattan right now. There are 2 bagel stores right on the corner that I pass every single morning, and I love a bagel for breakfast. And I also would like to not create serious health problems for myself, because professionally, I sit for a living. So eating bagels and then sitting all day is like not a great recipe for health. And every single morning I'm pulled to go get a bagel, and I'm pulled to not get a bagel and to eat something healthier. And I go through this challenge every single day. Our perspective is that ambivalence is not just a normal part of the process of change, it's an expected part of the process of change. Because there are reasons why the original behavior happened, like taking oxy, and that behavior makes sense. Every one of you was nodding when I was saying, I both don't want to run and I want to run. You're like, yeah, I totally get that. We can apply that same thing to saying there's a reason why it makes perfect sense to say, I both want to drink and I kind of don't. And I'm pulled in both directions at the same time. That's not denial. That's not backsliding. That's not me being underhanded or not caring. It's saying I'm ambivalent. I have really, really, really good reasons to go out and drink. And I have really, really, really good reasons to not drink. And I'm pulled in both directions at the same time. Ambivalence is normal. New behaviors do not compete with the old behaviors. Or, I'm sorry, they can compete with them, but they don't erase them. Right? So if I start picking up guitar and learning music or really getting into music, that doesn't make my desire to drink go away or to smoke pot go away. It's just a new behavior. Now it might compete. I might say, oh man, I know that when I'm high, I think my music is great, but everyone else thinks it's awful. And so do I really want to be smoking pot like that? Because right now I've got competition, but it doesn't take away my desire to do it. Ambivalence is something that we can see. We can see it in a person's behavior, right? Some days they're trying to get super healthy and they're really taking things seriously and I'm going to turn things around. And the next day they're like, nah, forget it. I'm not doing any of that. And we can see it in people's language, right? And this comes up in what we call as red lights and green lights, right? Like there are ways in which people are saying, I'm open to this, and ways that people are saying, I'm not. Ambivalence is very sensitive to the response of others. And I think this is something that Saul was bringing up before, right? You say, why are you doing this? Right? And that's tinged in the idea of, you should not be doing this. So you're taking one side of the ambivalence coin. When you do that, I'm coming in on the other side. Well, here are the reasons why I have to do it. So ambivalence is super sensitive to what it is that we're saying and what we're hearing from others. And the common reaction from outside when we notice that there's ambivalence is we say, I want ambivalence to go away. I am not comfortable with your ambivalence. I want to make it go away. I want to talk some sense into them. I've been told I should confront their denial. Or I'm going to pretend it's not happening because I don't want this. Here is the research, though. Change is not a straight line. Change is a jagged course. It does not follow just a straight upward trajectory. It goes up and it goes down. It goes up and it goes down. And old behaviors that they were engaging with, they still work, even though change has started. They still provide that. Having a drink at the end of the day can still relieve some of the stress and help you ease into hanging out and ease into home life from work, regardless of whether or not you've changed your behaviors or not. It still works. So we have two voices in our head. We have the voice that says, I really want to change. And then we've got another voice that says, oh, I really like what I already have. And the insider tip, the very important piece, is how we react to and talk to our loved one, how we engage with them can help get voice number one to be stronger, that change voice. Questions about ambivalence is normal? Questions about anything from the understanding section before we take a short break?
I just wanted to make a comment on the slide before. When we were talking about different types. Yeah. Oh, it might have been the one before that. When we were talking about the different types of treatment that people were open to. And you made the comment like, can he just start with a therapist or a counselor? And even that has so many layers, right? Is there a therapist that has cultural competency for my particular child? Do they speak the language? Where are they located? Are they in my community? Because I don't want anybody to see me. So now I have to go someplace else. And I just wanted to mention that, you know, we throw that sentence out there, but there's so many layers, even in the simplest sentence.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tanya, because the reality of finding a therapist is that finding a therapist is really not easy on its own, right? That's a whole nother set of struggles. I run CMC's podcast, and I've said this on the podcast, and I've said this on the show, and I say this to individuals. I say, finding a therapist is a little bit like trying on jeans. Just because it says the size that is your size on the label doesn't mean that the cut fits your body. You got to try on a whole bunch of jeans in order to find the one that fits. Or you got to try on a bunch of therapists in order to find the one that fits you. And that's a hard process.
And that's okay.
That's right.
And I think that needs to be said, because sometimes you try a therapist or two and you're like, you know what, this just doesn't work. It doesn't work for me. I've tried two. It's okay to keep trying.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I encourage people to keep trying. And I encourage everybody to keep trying. Even when somebody comes and meets with me the first time and they say, this feels like a good fit, I say, well, let's see how you feel in a couple of weeks. Right? You don't know yet. Right? And we have to keep trying, and we have to understand that. And that needs to be part of the regular conversation. Thank you so much, Tanya. And you said a couple of other important things, right? Is there cultural competence, right? Not every therapist is right for me or understands my circumstances and my family's circumstances and where I come from and how we work. Right? And what is important to us. And so sometimes you want somebody from your neighborhood, and sometimes you want people who are part of your community, and sometimes you don't. Right? And we got to find the right person for each individual. So in no way am I saying like, all right, well, just like, here's the simple one, start with a therapist. No, that's really hard. But I want to add that into the list before I say, all right, well, you got to go to rehab. Because rehab is great for some people, but rehab is not the answer for every single person all the time. Sometimes we want to start significantly lower on the intervention scale. Other questions or thoughts? Thank you, Tanya. All right. Oh, go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, hi.
Yeah, I have a question, but you can leave it till after the break. I'd like to understand this area that I've heard about called harm reduction with respect to people who have substance abuse problems, and
Sure.
what it is, and it seems to, I've asked some people about it. It seems to be a little polarizing. Some people believe in it, some people don't. I'm wondering if either you, Josh, or any of the other clinicians in this meeting before the end of the meeting could just say a couple sentences about that, perhaps even just give me more of the definition of what it is. Thank you.
Sure. I'm going to give you the real quick version of it, and then we're going to take a break. The real quick version of harm reduction is it says, okay, if we are not working towards abstinence, if we're not trying to take the substance off, then we are trying to work on how do we reduce the harm of use. So for example, making sure, like what I said before, I have fentanyl strips in the house and I have naloxone in the house. And I make sure that everyone knows where it is and everyone knows how to use it. And that's a conversation that we can have. That's harm reduction. It says, I'm not trying to get you to stop. I'm trying to reduce the potential harm that comes from you using. Harm reduction can take a million different forms. It could be anything from saying, hey, let's, here's a very classic harm reduction thing that's been on TV a million times, is saying to a teenager, listen, if you drink too much, I want you to call me. Don't get in a car with anybody. Call me. I will show up. I will ask no questions. We will not talk about it. I will come pick you up. I will pick up you and any of your friends, and I will deliver them home. That is harm reduction, right? I'm reducing the harm, the potential harm of substance use, right? And we can use that in a lot of different ways. There's a lot of ways to be able to say, hey, let's talk about this. Let's think this through. Let's kind of do this together so that we can help. Again, it's just reducing the harm of the fact that I know you're going to keep using. That's a thing that's going to happen. And so I'm working to try and take some of those layers away. Some people would say, nope, that doesn't work because abstinence is the only way to do that, right? I would say that the research shows that that is significantly incorrect.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, why don't we take a break? I know we had said that it should be a 15-minute break. Barbara, are you okay if we take like a slightly smaller break so that way we could be on time? So is everybody okay with like taking a 10-minute break? And if you got to bring food or drinks or something back, you can do that and sit and eat while we talk. All right, great. So why don't you come on back here in 10 minutes? That would be 2:17. 2:17.
I didn't get that.
Like, give me something. And so I want to make sure that you have something to do, that you could say, all right, here's a thing that I can be working on after this. And I think we're going to do that by jumping into a little bit of helping with action. So the first question that I would have is, right, both of these are ways of helping. You can smash it, or you can have that very kind of calming effect, that calming impact that then sends out ripples. Both of them change the environment that you're in. Which do you want to be? The hammer? Or do you want to be the droplet of water? The research shows that the hammers, they might make instantaneous change in a moment, tends not to be long lasting. The droplet of water tends to create much more long lasting change. It might take longer. It might be more nuanced, a little bit more difficult. Not even necessarily more difficult, just different. But it has a greater impact over a longer period of time. So these are the two sections of helping with action. There's the communication tools. How do we turn red lights to green lights? And behavioral tools. How do we catch them being good? This is what we're going to focus on right now. We're going to start by talking about turning red lights to green lights. So this is a pretty common thing that when we're talking to parents, it's what we get. All we ever do is shout at each other or shut each other down. Conversations don't work. She just needs to hit rock bottom. Oh, you can't talk to them. You're just talking to the addicted brain. Well, I say the same thing over and over again, but he doesn't listen. And she doesn't care what I have to say. This is, if we're talking to parents, this is their experience. Let's shift that perspective. Communication is a super powerful tool. And the words that we choose matter, right? We talked about this a little bit when we were talking about the idea of the word addict, right? That there's so much associated with that. Our brains do not, they can't tease it all apart. When you call someone an addict, whatever preconceived notions they have about that word, about that label, is put onto them. And we don't get to say, oh, well, I'm only accepting part of it, because it's just not how we work as human beings. So the words that we choose matter. Positive communication is a set of ways of talking that tends to turn down the heat, make it a little less contentious, to encourage positive behaviors amongst individuals, and to shift ambivalence, meaning it moves somebody towards that voice of change, and it opens more doors. Negative communication, which is really confronting someone, shouting at them, labeling them. We can come up with others. That tends to close doors. When we're doing that, it tends to shut the door down. And the best way to be able to shift towards positive communication is to see red lights and green lights in communication. So what are we talking about? We're talking about, I'm going to skip this slide. I'm going to go back to this slide. What we're talking about are listening and looking for moments where the person you're talking to is saying, I'm not ready to engage in this conversation. If you think about the red light that's at that intersection, you know the one in your town that everyone drives through, that as soon as it turns red, you better not, and your light turns green, you better not go right away because you know there's two cars that are going to try and zoom through. And you know that's a dangerous intersection. And that's an intersection. I should not go through this. I should not try to go fast because cars are not going to respect that. And that's how you cause accidents. Excuse me. It's exactly the same in communication. Is that if we drive right through and we ignore the person saying, hey, I do not want to talk about this. We shut down. We shut them down. And we shut down their ability to engage, and we make it less likely that we're going to be able to get where we want. Green lights is somebody showing a little bit of like, oh, that's interesting. They're showing that they're a little more open to the feedback. And the ways that we can work on shifting is by listening and listening collaboratively, to really trying to listen to a person. And this is what I was saying early on in the beginning. Like, I want you to tell me, and I want to learn, because I don't know what it's like to be inside your body, even if I know you intimately. And I'm just hoping that maybe you can share that with me. That's a way to turn red lights into green lights. If all I'm doing is listening, not offering, not saying, oh, but have you thought about this? Just thank you for sharing. I'm really listening. Tell me more. And then when you are offering information collaboratively, which we call the information sandwich. And we're not actually going to go through that because I want to give you something that's a little bit more practical that you guys can feel like you can grab onto today. Right? But the information sandwich is basically saying, starting out by saying, hey, can I offer you some information? And then finding a way to offer it. And we offer you a way to do that, but offering the information that if they say yes, you can offer me information. Doing it in a way that says, I'm not telling you, I'm just suggesting this is another thing to think about.
Yeah, quick question.
Yeah.
The listening collaboratively, would part of that be just straight reflection? So when the loved one, let's say, comes with a lot of angst and anger, rather than pushing back and saying, you just need to do this, you just need to do that, simply reflecting and saying, wow, I get that you're really angry and you're not feeling good, or basically crystallizing the emotions. And is that part of it?
So I'm gonna, if I can find where to do this, I'm gonna give you a big gold star here today.
Oh, okay.
Exactly what it is. Here's.
I do have to acknowledge I'm married for 30 years to a psychologist in private practice.
There's a little clapping just for you.
I've tangentially learned a bit from her.
Right. Occasionally, psychologists mistakenly share some of our information at home, and it sometimes rubs off. But that's exactly that's a great way of listening. Is just reflecting back, not arguing, not telling somebody, but reflecting back.
Okay.
Here's where
I just offer as well that being careful, really not to sound like a therapist, because often my son would say to me, would you just leave that nonsense at home, at work? You know, this, you're sounding like somebody who you're not. You're the mom here. So, you know, making sure that you maintain that mom or dad role and not sounding like, could you tell me a little more about that? And they're like, no, I really can't, you know, like.
Hey, Barbara,
So,
I'm even guilty of saying that to my wife over the years.
absolutely. Yeah, right. Usually when I'm annoyed.
Yep, people have said it to me, and it is hard. It's a real thing, and you have to be genuine when you're coming into conversations. Osma, did I say your name right? Osma?
Yeah. I was just going to say it's really hard to listen when there's delusions and psychosis involved.
Yeah. It is really hard to listen when those things are involved. I'd say it's hard to listen when we are listening to something that is really painful for us. Right? There's a lot of ways in which listening can be very hard, and it takes a lot of work and a lot of practice and a lot of support, which is why we need to have lots of people in our lives who can help us with this. And I'd say delusions and psychosis only makes it that much worse, right? Because it's like, oh my God, that's so scary. I'm scared about the things that you're saying. So I want to shift us real quick because I want to, and I apologize for the abruptness, but I want to make sure that we get to this, right? About behaviors making sense. So if we look at this little thing, right? A behavior happens. That's over here. This is the behavior that happens. Now, two things can happen from this. Either the behavior is reinforced, or the behavior is not reinforced. If a behavior is reinforced, what's going to happen next? The behavior is going to repeat. Any of you who have a dog knows this, right? You want to teach the dog to lie down. Every time the dog lies down, you give them a treat, and then they say, oh, and now they keep lying down right at your feet. And you give them a treat, and they keep lying down at your feet. And then if you want to stop a dog from doing something, they, scratch at the door, and then they look at you, and you look away. And you say, I'm not going to give you any reinforcement. I'm not going to punish you. I'm not going to yell at you. I'm just going to look away. And they're not going to keep doing it because they're not getting what they want. So when the behavior is not reinforced, the behavior stops. This is like the simplest form of behavior, understanding behavior in human beings. Well, how does this help, right? Well, let's just think about what we already hear. He's just on a mission to use. There's nothing I can do. Or she doesn't seem to know the difference between right and wrong. I'm so mad. I don't care if he's trying to be sober. It's just too late. Why on earth would I say thank you for coming home when he's been late every single night for weeks? If we flip this around and we think about this beautiful garden here, we think about just how we get gardens and how we get beautiful gardens, right? When you are planting a garden, what's the biggest thing that you're concerned about? Weeds. And how do you deal with weeds? Well, you can pick them out, right? And you can slowly pull them all out. Or you can say, you know what? I'm actually going to water all of the plants that I like, and I'm going to not water any of the weeds. And if I don't water the weeds, what's going to happen to them? They're going to die, right? And they're going to start to go away. And if I'm very selectively watering just the plants that I want and not watering the weeds, I'm going to have less and less weeds over time. And that is positive reinforcement. So here is a way of thinking about positive reinforcement. And there's three different parts to it. And I'm looking to see, I keep seeing that there's a chat, but I'm not seeing a new chat. So if you're trying to chat me, you should just talk to me. The first part, as I would say, is what behaviors are you looking for? What is the behavior that you would look for or that you would support? Box 2 is what behaviors or event do you not like, but it's okay, like you're willing to experience them. And box 3 are, what are the behaviors that are outside of the realm of me being willing to accept it? I'm not okay with these. And if we think about it in this way, right, then we can say, right, want, willing, and won't. And you can make these boxes, you could just draw this out on a sheet of paper. This is like not, I don't think anybody's looking at this being like, wow, that's confusing. And then we can think about it like this. If there's some behavior that's in there that I want to do, or I want to see, I'm going to try to positively reinforce it. We'll talk about what that looks like. And if there are behaviors that I want to limit or that I want to reduce, right, on the edges, right, I'm going to work towards allowing natural consequences, limit setting my own limits, and stepping away. This is the spot that most people start out with. This bottom part. All right, how do I set up consequences for them? How do I make them stop by seeing that it's like I'm adding some pain? But if I really want that garden to grow, the thing I want to focus on is the positive reinforcement. How do I start to build up behaviors that are going to crowd out the other behaviors? And if you think about a really good garden, you see that they are full of plants and they've got no weeds. And the reason they have no weeds is because those plants, the roots, took up all the space. Because there are so many plants that they want, there's not a lot of space for the plants that we don't want. So how do we do this? Well, the first thing that we can do is we catch them being good. Right? That reinforcement requires noticing a behavior you want to support and reinforcing it. This isn't just about being nice. I am less interested in any of you being just like nice people. You all seem very nice to me. But this is about saying, I'm looking for the behaviors that I want to see, and then I'm going to let them know that I saw it. Positive reinforcement works best when provided after the behavior, not before. Meaning, I do not want to say, hey, I'm so proud of the fact that you're going to go to school today. Here is some extra money. Because right, then they might not go to school. They got the reward already. Give them the reward after they've done the behavior. Reinforcement is most effective when it's consistent, timely, and matched appropriately to the level of behavior, not over or under. So what do we mean by that? Consistent, right? If I never know when I'm going to get that positive reinforcement, maybe I'll get it, maybe I won't. That's not so helpful. I need to know it's coming. I need to know what I need to do in order to get it. I need to know that it's going to come right after. If I say, oh, yeah, you totally, like, yes, you hit all of those things. You came home on time every day this week, just like I asked. And then they say, well, but I don't know. Yeah, you said that you were going to give me a reward. You said you were going to give me, extra time with the car so I could go see my friends. And you say, oh, yeah, that'll happen next week or next month. Right? That's not timely. I don't actually feel rewarded for it. And it has to be matched appropriately to the level of behavior. If you say, well, if you go to school today, I will buy you Super Bowl tickets. That's like a bit much. Or if you say, hey, if you can come home tonight at your curfew, I will give you a sticker. That's too little. And so it's not going to be helpful. So it has to be matched appropriately, and it's got to be something that they are actually going to find rewarding. Not that you find rewarding, right? You might want to go see a Barbra Streisand concert. They might not. So we got to figure out something that they want to do. And remember, the reward of substance use is consistent, timely, it's matched to what they're looking for, and it's in their control. So it's super duper reinforcing. So if we want to be reinforcing, we have to actually be those things as well. We don't have to beat it. We will lose a competition against drugs.
Josh, can I ask a question?
Yes.
So I work professionally in the business world and have an MBA and have done a lot of work also in organizational behavior and practices. And there is some very interesting research in business environments that say that although you might think that the most motivating thing for staff is to give them tangible reinforcement like increase, bonuses and increased salaries, that all does work, but that the power of purely verbal reinforcement, verbal acknowledgement of a job well done, the theoretical pat on the back is unbelievably powerful in getting staff to work towards goals and to work as teams, et cetera, et cetera. And my question is, does that translate into the substance abuse environment? You've just verbally given some examples of giving tickets and using the car, but somebody coming home on time, rather than let them walk into the house and up to their room, you make a point of saying, wow, I really appreciate the fact that you came back as we discussed, or just positive verbal reinforcement. Does that work?
Absolutely. It works, and it is super powerful. In fact, I would go ahead and say the most, maybe not the most, but like one of the most, and probably for a lot of your kids, the most powerful reinforcer is you. Okay? You are an extremely powerful reinforcer. And just noticing, offering time, offering to sit with them, right? They might not want to go to that concert with you, but they might want to hang out with you. They might want to watch TV with you. They might just want to hug. They might just want you to say, hey, I saw you doing that. And I saw you being good. And I saw you doing this nice thing. And I thought that was awesome. Okay. And if we look at this image that we've got on the screen, if there's a behavior that you're looking for, like being open, and there's a response, and you appreciate that person being, you just say, hey, I saw you were just being really open with me. Thank you so much. The effect is that it's more likely to happen again. So how does positive reinforcement help you as parents? Well, it encourages helpers to find responses that strengthen and grow behaviors. As I said before, you want long-term change, you want to see real success, positively reinforce the behaviors that you want to see. That's how we make long-term, long-lasting change. How else does it help? I want to stay more connected. If I get to do the fun stuff, like say, hey, you did awesome today. It's real hard to always be the heavy. It's real hard to always be saying how they did something wrong. It feels much more likely that I'm going to stay connected and stay supportive and stay like with the person if this is about something that's positive. It allows you to respond to positive behaviors even when they're mixed in with negative behaviors. So for example, let's say that you said your kid is going out to a party and they are driving, and you say, listen, it's really important to me that you do not drive drunk, you do not drive on any substances. And right, we're working on you coming home at curfew, so please be home at midnight. And let's say they come home at 2 a.m., but they come home sober. Right? It's a mixed bag. And I can say, hey, you're here sober. I am so proud. You did not drive drunk. You did not drive under the influence. I'm so proud of you for that. And I'm choosing to focus on that. I'm going to not focus on the fact that they're late. I'm actually going to ignore that. I'm going to step away from that. and I'm going to reinforce the behavior that I wanted to see. Right? That's huge. Or if, let's say, you did the same scenario and they instead called you and said, I need you to come pick me up. Oh, I'm super angry that they went out and they drank and they had the car. I am so happy that you called me. And I can reinforce that. And so I'm now constantly finding these positives, even in very difficult negatives, where I used to come in and just be like, I can't believe they're doing this again. Barbara, did you want to say?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. So, you know, I think in the very beginning, I didn't actually put out a, you know, you have to be home at 11 o'clock. But if he came home early and was not using, I didn't say, you know, oh, you did a good job. I just gave my time. Like, it was much more subliminal than to say, you know, this is I'm punishing you or I'm not punishing you. It was just much more subliminal. It was more like, you got my attention because you did what I wanted you to do. I didn't have to say that that's what I wanted you to do, but you know it, you know, by the time they're in their 18, 19, 20, they know kind of what's expected. And I gave more of my time. You know, sometimes people would say, oh, you know, he came home drunk and you fed him. Yeah, but he came home at 11 o'clock, you know, and so, yeah, I did hold supper for him and we ate, you know, or I did sit with him while he even chomped on potato chips, you know, but I sat with him. I made myself stay awake to do that, right? It was much more subliminal than just a, you know, a punishment or a non-punishment. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think, right, you're talking about punishment. I want to just sort of define what we're talking about here. Excuse me. Punishment is when I'm adding an aversive response in response to something that somebody did. So, oh, you came home drunk? Now here's your consequence. What we're working on in this, and if we were talking about sort of the how do we reduce behaviors, we would be saying, I want you to know beforehand, this is what's going to happen. If you come home and you are drunk, here's how this is going to, here's how I'm going to respond, and here's how we're going to do that. And that shifts away from a punishment paradigm to, I'm setting a limit. I'm letting you know beforehand. This is part of your own, like, I think about it as like, it's like the calculus that everyone goes through. Like, all right, let me just run through this and like weigh the pros and the cons, and then I'm going to make my choice, right? And I'm letting you know already like what the pros and cons are. What this is about saying, right, I'm going to be able to identify these things that I'm doing. Now, I totally agree with Barbara. We don't always have to overly spell everything out. What I would say, though, is that there is a real benefit to spelling out more than not. Because if I spell it out and I say, hey, you're home at 11, which is something that I really appreciate, and so that's why I'm sitting here with you, that lets them know, okay, this is the thing you did that is actually helpful. So now I know a little bit more what behavior I should try and repeat.
Yeah. Does it get harder to do that when they're 20 and 25? Does that get harder to do?
It changes some things because they're not in the house as much, and well, they're potentially not in the house as much. Let's not assume that everyone's out of the house. It can become a little bit more difficult, but again, you just start to change, right? So my daughters are 10, and it's a lot of like, did you clean up your room? Did you put your homework away? And right, that's going to change when they're in high school, and it's going to change when they're in their 20s, and it's going to change when they're, you know, later on in life, of how I'm reinforcing and what I'm reinforcing. But I'm still going to do those things that says, hey, you were really nice to, my daughters are twins, and so they are often at each other. And I will still say to them, hey, you were just really kind to her, and I appreciate that. And so that's why I'm sitting here with you doing this right now. That feels like above and beyond what I normally would be doing. And it's because you did this positive behavior. And I want to make sure, I want to tie those things together so that they really know, oh, I do this behavior, I get this kind of response. Asma, what's up?
Yeah, my situation is it's an adult daughter. She's 35. It's long-term chronic opioid use disorder, severe, and mental health issues. So I've reached the point I don't want to give her money.
Mm-hmm.
I'm clear about that, but I want to remain in communication. But really, the only time she ever calls is for money.
Mm-hmm.
So I want, like, she's sort of stopped communicating with me because, so that is a success. But how do I support communication with that restriction in place?
Sure. Okay. So this is it's all tricky, which is why it's super helpful to have groups like this, or therapists, or lots of people who you can be talking to about this, because we have to learn to be creative. One of the ways that we can be creative is you can say, all right, there are certain things that I can sort of put money into that makes it very hard for you to get cash. So for example, I might be willing to put money directly onto a grocery delivery app, or to purchase your groceries for you. And that's a way I can be giving you money without actually handing you cash. Now, you might say, oh, but they're just going to like buy groceries for other people and then get cash. Yeah, we can't stop them. They're already doing all kinds of things to get money. But this is a way that I can increase the odds that I'm going to be in touch with them, which is a behavior I want to see. That's a behavior I care about, and make it a little bit more difficult for them to be able to use this just for substance, to buy, more substances. Now, one other thing I might do is just talk and say, hey, listen, I would really like to talk to you more. And actually, I don't need to talk to you about substance use. I don't need to talk to you about your substance use. I would love to just hear how you're doing. And can we change the way that we're talking? Can we change what we're talking about? Or even just asking, like, why, I know that it's been hard. I know that you haven't really wanted to talk to me much lately. I would really love to talk to you. Is there some way that I can help make that happen? What can I do? And then we can start that conversation. And by starting that conversation and having that conversation, again, we're hitting that idea of how do we be collaborative to work together to find a way to be able to engage in this behavior that I want to see. And so there's tons of options about how we can positively reinforce. And we got to be able to think creatively about that. I want to go over why this is helpful for other people, for the person who you're trying to help. When you're helping the other person, supporting behaviors increases the likelihood that the behavior is going to happen again and again and increase. Right? So if I am reinforcing a behavior, whether it's noticing it and just commenting on it, whether it's like showing a little more praise for it, whether it's reinforcing it by saying like, oh, hey, you do these things and I'm going to make it like an even sweeter deal by adding more onto it. I mean, that's how behaviors grow. No, there's none of you who go to work and say, well, maybe they'll pay me, maybe they won't, and I'm fine with that. I'm still going to come to work. You go to work because you get paid. That's a reinforcement. Right? And if they don't pay you, you're not going to keep going to work. So, right, we get reinforced. And if you're saying, but I'm volunteering, I don't get paid for that. Well, I get reinforced there in other ways, right? I get reinforced by helping people and that feels good for me, or being engaged and watching a community that I care about grow. That's reinforcing for me. So we do things because we get reinforced. And so if we're reinforcing, that's going to increase the odds that the other person is going to keep doing these behaviors. And that reinforcement helps support this idea of positive opposites. Positive opposites are behaviors that compete with the substances. Remember, I was saying about playing guitar before. I said, all right, well, when I'm playing guitar and I'm sober and I actually know what I'm doing, people seem to really like it. So that's helpful. Or I got a gym membership and I really like it. I feel good about myself. I feel like it's really helpful. And if I drink too much tonight, I'm not going to go to the gym tomorrow. That's going to be a bummer. So, right, that's a positive opposite because it makes it harder for me to just use the substances in the same way because it will have an impact on this thing that I care about. And finally, reinforcement helps develop a sense that the world can be rewarding without substances. Right? If you're using all the time, you don't have that idea. Right? The world is reinforcing when I'm high and it's not reinforcing when I'm not. And if we start to reinforce actually other parts of the life, that's like, oh, wait a minute. There might be another way that I can engage in this. There might be another way that I can engage in this world and still feel good and still get things out of it. So what I'm going to encourage everybody to do is to think about what positive behaviors do I want to encourage and support? And then what supportive responses can I give that's going to strengthen those behaviors? And if you just wrote out a list that said, here are some behaviors that I want to reinforce. Here are things that I care about. And then the next column say, what can I do to get them to do that? What are ways that I can do it? And I would want to put it into, let's see what we've got here. I want to make this box here. I want to think about reinforcers that are free, reinforcers that cost something, reinforcers that are activities, and reinforcers that are words. And if I think about these 4 categories, then I'm hitting everything because look, I am well aware. And I'm actually in this box. I can't buy my kids theater tickets or concert tickets every time that they clean up their room, nor do I want to. A, I don't have the money, and B, I don't want them to think every time I clean my room, I get this, giant thing, or you'll pay me. And so sometimes I want to make sure that there are things that are free, or there are things that are just words. Sometimes I want to say, like, maybe it's if you do this way bigger thing, or you do this consistently over a period of time, then you could get something that's bigger. Then you could get something that maybe costs something that's an activity or something else. But like other times, it'll be just, hey, you said that you wanted to watch this show that I really don't want to watch, but I'll watch it with you. Or like Barbara said, you're going to sit here and munch on potato chips? I'll sit here with you. I will give you of my time. I will make sure I stay awake. I will ask you about your night. It's going to be like a kind human being to you. I think this video sums up positive communication in a really nice way. We make it a little bit nicer to do the things that we want people to do. They're more likely to do it. Okay. I've already told you all, I don't like going to the gym, but if they find a way to make it better, I'd probably do it. Right. And that's why I'm running this race, because it's more fun for me than going on a treadmill or running in a park. So positive reinforcement is one of the things that I feel like is a tool that everyone can actually walk out of here and say, okay, now with my new understanding that the behaviors make sense, that the ambivalence makes sense, that it's expected, that I can't think about this as like, all right, what does everybody else do? But what does my kid need? And I can think about, and what are the behaviors that I want to see? And let me see if I can increase those. That's something everyone can walk away from today and say, all right, I've got something. I've got something I can do that's going to push me forward, that's going to move me towards what I want. So I'm going to stop here for today. We've got about 2 minutes left. I just want to open to see if there's anybody has anything, any questions, anything that I can help with. I want to thank you all for being here and for participating, for being part of this, for taking the time out of your day to engage. Charles, you want I don't know which Charles, because there's like 700 Charleses on here, because anybody who used Charles's email, any link got his name on there. You want my email? Is that what whoever put that in, your email, please?
Well, just can I say why you finding that I like the way that you changed the perspective of how you looked at just what was going on, the substance abuse or whatever it is, how you changed the perspective and put it in a way that we could make a change. And that change will come from us changing what we see, and it'll come from them seeing what we project. So thank you.
Thank you, Gail. Believe me, I cannot say this enough. It is actually my honor to be here and to be able to talk to all of you. Really, I cannot express that enough.
Somebody posted, I think your admin posted, that there would you would share the PowerPoint and as well as the video links again. Will that be sent to all the emails that registered for this?
I'm hoping to be able to do that. Yes.
Okay, that's Barbara,
Amy?
right?
Yes, Amy, are you sending it, or were we going to send it?
I can send it to you, and you can send it to the email list.
Send it out soon. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Barb, some didn't sign on. They're on as Charles. Will you know who you're sending it to unless they change their name? Or are you just going to send it to? It's more really registered
That's
than
a Charles question. Charles.
More registered than
who's registered. It should be fine.
The real registration will be the one that gets the surveys and all of that. They just have the link right now, so no one else is the real me.
Gotcha.
also, I wanted to ask the videos, which I thought I agree with. I think Andrea, who posted here, that the videos were unbelievably effective to kind of drive home the point you were making in each section of the presentation. Those videos are branded with, I guess, CMC. So are they shareable on social media? For example, if I'd like to share one of your videos on my Facebook feed with people, we're allowed to do that, right? Because the attribution's there?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Share away.
Share away.
And I just want to, I know some people are popping off offline. Please do follow this survey link. Sorry, actually that's the wrong link. Here, let me find the actual right one. But please fill out the survey. It's hugely helpful for us. It really helps us continue to be able to do this. So if you can follow that link before you leave, if you have to leave now, please copy that link. It really, really helps us. And then I can talk more on that later, but want to see if there's any more questions or if Josh had anything else to say.
Viviana, go ahead.
All done? All right. So,
very much. I really appreciate that it was an incredible training, the idea of ambivalence. I don't know why, but I can definitely relate to that, but I had never really heard that before. I guess I didn't really know the meaning. And for me, that was one of the key learnings of the training, the ambivalence, and the idea that really like the idea of what the one size does not fit all, and how you have to really be open with different options. So I just wanted to thank you. This training was amazing. I really appreciate the opportunity to be part of it. Thank you.
And I would say to everyone, get on that CMC website. There's so many resources there, and oftentimes where they're, doing the full training, and it's definitely worth your money to do that. So yeah, CMC is an absolute great resource for us.
Thank you. Thank you. Asma?
Somebody else asked this question on the website. There doesn't seem to be any more of the more fuller training sessions scheduled.
So we schedule new trainings all the time. The best way to be notified and to make sure you can attend the next time we host a training is to follow this link here, our email list that I just put into the chat. If you sign up for that, you can either sign up for the whole shebang, our newsletter, everything, or you can just sign up for updates, which means that you'll just see emails that say upcoming event, ITC training, and you'll know to register for it. And there'll be a range of lengths. Some will be smaller, like 3 or 4 hours like this. Some will be the full 16-hour, but that's the best way to keep in touch with us.
Okay, and is it only for professionals?
Yeah.
All of our trainings are, so some of our trainings are more targeted at families or peer professionals or psychologists, et cetera, depending on who we know is in the audience. We'll definitely try to be mindful of that. But truly it's the same training, and truly we think it's important that both professionals and lay people are seeing the same materials, because for one thing, we don't want to keep family members from knowing that this stuff is really effective and that it's out there. We want people to have that information, just like professionals have access to it. And meanwhile, we also don't want, when we're speaking to professionals, to use overly technical language that doesn't ultimately translate to families. So even if something's marked families or professionals, you're always welcome to sign up.
Unfortunately, I have got to jump off because I have another session, but thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to leave you. Amy has some more information. She can answer some more questions. And I put my email in the chat if anybody needs to reach out to me.
Josh, thank you for everything. Your presentation was wonderful.
Thank you. Yep. Agreed.
Bye.
Bye-bye.